Welcome back to Inside Health Education. This is your host, Enrique Hasso, the Associate Director of the Texas Health Education Service in the TMDSA's office in Austin, Texas. Joining us today is John Fierst, the Assistant Director of Academic Advising at Rice University. John, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's great to be here.
Well, as many of you all know from the Apply magazine, John is actually one of the authors of an article that we have, which is called, "But That Has Nothing to Do with Being a Doctor," and then in open parentheses, "Yes, it does." And so John's going to walk us through thinking about how different activities that you have leading up to your career as either a doctor, dentist, or veterinarian, or even any other healthcare areas, how the different activities that you've built up over the years can actually have application to your career as a health professional. But before we get into that, John, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I've been here at Rice in the Office of Academic Advising for nearly 3 years now. And I think really the big inspiration behind this article came from when I was working back in Indiana, where I'm from. And I was working with a program called the Life Health Sciences Internship Program at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. And through that experience, that's really kind of where I got my first foray into the world of transferable skills. The program that I was working with basically matched students to experiences in research and other areas within the life and health sciences in a variety of different areas. And one of the things that we really wanted to emphasize with our students was that even if you don't end up working in healthcare or don't end up working in a research lab for the rest of your career, that you could still gain something valuable from this experience. And so we were really intentional with our interns in helping them see the value of their experiences no matter what they ended up doing. And so a big piece of that did come from transferable skills. And so now that I'm working with a lot of pre-med and pre-health students here at Rice, a big piece of what they do is getting experiences in a lot of different areas and then using those as part of their applications to medical school, dental school, any other health profession school. And so I think that there is sometimes maybe some hesitancy to pursue activities that may seem outside the realm of healthcare or outside the realm of medicine. But building upon my experience from the Life Health Sciences Internship Program, I've really been able to help students see that there are a lot of really valuable skills that they can gain from any kind of experience that they get. And it's just a matter of kind of reflecting on those experiences and maybe sitting down and having a conversation about them in order to kind of tease out some of those transferable skills that will really help them become a successful healthcare professional in the future.
Excellent. And this is why we have you talking about this subject. It's very interesting to think about transferable skills for pre-health students because, as you mentioned, a lot of times we think that there's a cookie cutter version of what the schools are looking for, when in fact the schools are actually looking for a person who is able to pursue a career as a healthcare professional. And so there are different elements, different experiences that go into play. And so this is why we're so excited to have you on to discuss this subject, John.
Sure.
Yeah. So before we do get into this, I do want to get back on my soapbox about the competencies and the domains that have been defined by the veterinary schools, the dental schools, and the medical schools. And so we actually have these links posted in the description of this episode. But I do want to remind you all that there are veterinary domains of competence, which include clinical reasoning, decision-making, communication, collaboration, professionalism. We have dental domains such as critical thinking, professionalism, communication, health promotion. And then we have the medical competencies, which will include service orientation, social skills, teamwork, ethical responsibility to self and others, reliability, dependability, et cetera, et cetera. So if this is the first you've heard of the competencies or the domains of competence, please take a look at some of these links to learn about these, because they are essentially what the schools are looking for in your application. And so as we're going through and talking about these transferable skills to becoming a healthcare professional, keep in mind that the schools have already outlined some of these adjectives that you should be looking at highlighting in your own application. So, John, can you tell us a little bit about how we can focus on the extracurricular part of a college career?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that pre-health students do to prepare a competitive application to their health professions programs. So as you know, you're taking classes, taking prerequisite courses, preparing for your standardized exam, whether that's the MCAT or the DAT or another exam. And obviously that clinical experience is really important, whether that's shadowing a healthcare professional or volunteering in that kind of clinical setting. But, as you mentioned, you have to be well-rounded to be a competitive applicant. And so it is important to have those things that you enjoy doing outside of all of those areas. And so I think it's important just to say, okay, what do I want to get out of my college years? What do I want to, walk across the graduation stage looking back on fondly? And what do I want to devote my time and energy to beyond just these direct things that maybe align directly with your future career? And so I think it's a wonderful opportunity, especially for freshmen and sophomores, to just explore what your campus has to offer, see what organizations maybe speak to you. If you have other causes or other things that you're very passionate about and want to pursue things related to those things, then by all means go for it. And so, I think people are multidimensional in many ways. And so you don't have to kind of pigeonhole yourself in one area. So if you enjoy, working with kids, go tutor kids in an after-school program, or if you like playing sports, go join the intramural team. So all these things that you like to do are still valuable and still making you that multidimensional kind of candidate. And even for students who maybe are working while they're in school too, just because you have to spend a significant part of your week working, that work experience is still valuable. It's still going to give you a solid foundation for skills that you can use later on in your healthcare career. So just because you might be working that part-time job for a lot of your free time doesn't mean that that's a negative thing. And in fact, it can actually give you some really good perspective that I think health profession schools can find very valuable.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I do want to chime in here because I have had some experience with talking to a lot of the students that I advise over the years. And, some of the most memorable things that have come out of what their interview discussions were about was actually about the activities that they did, because there were certain activities that actually stood out to their interviewers. And just to give you an example, there's one student that I had met with who was really surprised that their interviewer only wanted to talk about their experience with 4-H, because in their application, they entered that they were a pig wrangler for the 4-H, and they were involved with a rodeo locally. And this is not a veterinary student, by the way. This is a medical student. And so he was talking about how that experience was actually something he'd grown up with, and there were a lot of different things that it exposed him to, and it really gave him a sense of pride and connection to where he's from, because he was able to contribute to that organization. And similarly, with students I've interviewed for special programs, they have actually talked about, different things that they've been involved in that really connected them to wanting to become a doctor. But I think the most memorable ones are, people who were talking to me about reading to folks in nursing homes, and they would actually go in and read the Harry Potter series, because that was something that they were passionate about, and they were able to connect with people through something that they were passionate about. And so it wasn't necessarily something connected back to medicine in those two instances, but it was something that they were really passionate about. And you can really tell when somebody really loves what they're doing, because just the way that their posture changes, the way they light up. And that's kind of like the little spark that I want to see in connection to when they talk about connecting with other people and being of service to other people. And when you see the distinction between how they kind of sit up and change their demeanor when they're talking about something they love, you want to see that exact same reaction when they're talking about medicine or when they're talking about helping others. So I think we're on to something really major here in preparation for the application.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And a lot of those pieces of involvement that are maybe not as clinically related, you could say, maybe they do involve a cultural organization or a community service organization, or even just something completely for fun, like intramural sports. I've even had some students say, "Well, should I include, my year of playing soccer as part of intramurals?" I'm like, "Yes, absolutely include it." You've mentioned to me that you really enjoyed playing soccer as a de-stressor. It's really allowed you to make new friends. It's allowed you to, work as a team. And so, you might think, oh, well, this is not something that is worth mentioning on my application. Yet when I talk to you in person about it, you really do light up about it. And just thinking about the things that you've described in this kind of activity, it's actually quite valuable and should absolutely be included.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's a great segue for getting us into identifying some of the reflection strategies. And in the article that you wrote, you actually have several questions that I think are really important for people to hear and consider when they're thinking about how an activity will connect back to their career as a healthcare professional.
Yeah, definitely. I included 6 questions as part of my article. There are 4 in particular that I think can really be useful as far as teasing out those direct transferable skills from any activity that you do. One is just asking yourself, what did I learn while I was doing this thing? What did I learn while I was part of this organization? The second one, what skills or strengths do I have now that I did not have before? Number 3, how is participating in this activity or organization similar to being a doctor? And then finally, how will this experience make me a better doctor or healthcare professional in the future? And I think just kind of writing out answers to those questions can be a great first step in starting to identify how is this experience meaningful and how is this experience going to help me on my application, but also help me in the future when I do become a physician or dentist or other healthcare professional. Excellent.
And I think this is a great place to go over some examples that you have lined up for us.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So the first example, and I've mentioned this a little bit already, is just being a member of an intramural sports team. That is a great place to develop teamwork skills. And you think about yourself as a healthcare professional. Healthcare these days is very much team oriented. It's not just a single physician running every single thing. You have to share responsibility with nurses, with pharmacists, with administrators, with other people that are in your facility, helping make the whole thing run. And so learning teamwork can come from any number of experiences. And for a lot of people, sports is a great way to get that kind of teamwork experience.
Great.
And then another example that I had was being a tutor in an after-school organization. When you think about this, it's almost a one-to-one perfect analogy. The tutor is to the physician as the student is to the patient. You're really developing your communication skills in tutoring because you have to be able to explain concepts to children in a way that they understand and in a way that's going to make sense to them. And you have to really be empathetic towards students who may come from backgrounds that are really different from your own, or experiencing academic challenges that maybe you've never experienced before. And so that's going to be very similar to patients that you encounter as a healthcare professional, where you're going to have to be able to explain complex medical issues in a way that any patient can understand. And oftentimes your patients are going to be going through experiences with their health that you personally have not gone through before on your own. And so developing that empathy towards them, no matter their situation, is also really important. I did mention work experience as a fantastic way to garner some transferable skills to your future career. And so I think a great example of that is just working retail at a clothing store. You have to develop those people skills to be successful in that kind of role. And so you have to be able to approach customers in a respectful and helpful way. And similarly, as part of the medical community, you have to be able to meet patients with respect and listen to their concerns and really develop that rapport with them that you need in order to help them with whatever their treatment may be. And then another example that I had was like vice president of a college government or any kind of leadership position in an organization, whether that be college government or really anything else. And that's a great way to develop leadership skills by communicating with your fellow officers, communicating with your membership. Sometimes it involves making tough decisions or resolving conflicts, needing to come to an agreement about something. And if you think about yourself as a leader in the healthcare setting, you're going to have to be doing those exact same things to either keep your organization running or to ensure that the other members of your healthcare team are able to provide quality patient care and not sacrificing that just because something may be going on among you as the healthcare professionals and healthcare leadership.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to point out a couple of maybe fringe examples, if you will, things that are a little bit different and a little bit less on the radar. I actually had a student that I met with recently who is a bartender at our on-campus pub. And he talked about how this is a really meaningful experience to him. And at first glance, you might think, you're a bartender. How does this, match up at all to you wanting to be a doctor? And he really talked very well about how that really helped him increase his social skills and how he was able to read people and his hand-eye coordination got better and all these things that were actually quite transferable to being a doctor. And he said just that social environment really made him more comfortable approaching strangers and kind of trying to make conversation and get to know them in a pretty quick way. So I thought that was a fantastic example of something that looks on its surface to be very far removed from any kind of profession in healthcare. But really, if you think about it and reflect on it, this is actually something that is quite useful and can be quite impactful.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I also had another student, I think this was about a year ago, who was really into woodworking and carving. And he mentioned, if I become a surgeon one day, just the dexterity that I've developed through my woodworking hobby would actually be a huge asset to me in surgery. And I think that that's another fantastic example of just a hobby that somebody has and something that you enjoy doing in your spare time can really match up well with what your future career might be.
Right. And dexterity is actually a huge component for dental applicants as well. Yeah, definitely. That's amazing. And those are amazing examples of how, as you mentioned, somewhat fringe activities actually do have some sort of connection back to becoming a healthcare professional. All right. Well, John, thank you so much for those awesome examples. I think that gives a lot of our listeners some food for thought on how all of their activities might actually have some application to their application.
Sure.
Application. Interesting.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say, if you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share.
Sure. I think a lot of the things that we've discussed are widely applicable to a lot of our traditional applicants. But for our non-traditional applicants who might be listening to the podcast, I definitely want to point out that they should not write off any work experience that they've had that may be in a field outside of healthcare. And so if you were working, say, in the business world for a while and you decide you want to come back to being pre-med or being pre-dental or going into healthcare as sort of a career changer, don't think that you have to start from scratch and start at ground zero. You can still utilize those skills that you've gained in your career currently or in your job currently as an advantage and as a way to still give you a leg up in the application process. It'll just be important that you're able to articulate that well in your application and not just say, yeah, I worked as an accountant for 3 years, but don't worry about that. I'm focused on being a doctor now. Say, no, actually, that was 3 years of really great experience. And here's the things that I've gained in my career so far that may give me a different perspective on my career that somebody else who has not had this kind of full-time work experience would not be able to bring to the table. So for any non-traditional listeners, think about that too as you get closer to your application, that there's a lot of wonderful things that you'll be able to bring to the table as long as you're reflecting on them and articulating them well, that will make you stand out.
100%. And that's exactly the reason why the schools want to see these non-traditional applicants. They have life experience and they have all of these amazing opportunities that they've taken advantage of. So don't shortchange yourself by not including them.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I think if I might add, for reapplicants, you might also consider sitting back and thinking about the activities that you've entered previously in the application and figuring out, reflecting on them and using all of the questions that John mentioned earlier, and figure out what you've taken away from them and what they mean for you as a healthcare professional. As a reapplicant, you have the opportunity to essentially, reapply, and you have a big start over button. And so take advantage of that as you're entering your activities in the application.
That's a great point. I mean, your activity descriptions on your first application may have been perhaps a little too surface level. Maybe if all you did was describe the what and not the why and how behind it, this is a great opportunity for your second application to go back through, reflect a little bit deeper, and add some of the skills that you got out of those experiences to bring those activity descriptions to the next level.
Exactly. All right. Anything else, John?
I think that's got it from me.
Great. Well, again, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about this. Transferable skills are a really important thing that we haven't really discussed on the podcast before. So I really appreciate you joining us today to talk about that.
Sure, you're welcome. It was great to be here.
All right. And we will go ahead and include a link to all of the competencies and domains, as we mentioned earlier, in the description of this episode. And we'll also include a link to this year's Apply magazine, which includes the article that John Fierst wrote for us. So until next time, thank you all so much for listening. And on behalf of TMDSAS and the Texas Health Education Service, we'd like to wish all of our applicants all the best of luck this application cycle and hope that this topic has really helped you shine better in your application.
This is MedEd Media.